We want to get started right away because Sister Barbaralie has a lot to say. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sister Carol.
Well, let me give a little brief introduction to Sister Carol.
You know who she is?
Well, you all know Sister Carol, a former provincial. Anyway, she was the one that initiated the reconciliation ceremony, if you recall, at the college. And I would not have written this book. Is there an echo here?
Yeah, she's going to fix it.
I would not have written this book had it not been for Carol, because she is the one. Carol.
Oh, those two mics are probably too close together.
All this technology. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Everyone. Had it not been for Carol, and I don't know why I didn't think of writing this, because it's a historical happening that's very significant in our order. So I'm going to ask Carol to give a little introduction of what preceded the invitation to the Sisters of St. Joseph to have this reconciliation. Carol, you're on.
Are you gonna buzz? I just want to begin by saying that it was not Carol, it was the provincial team.
Yeah.
So let's be very clear about that. It's Deb and Marilyn and Carol. No, you're forgiven.
No.
You know, all our years, the conversation about what happened with the Sisters of St. Joseph, Third Order of St. Francis, was don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't talk about it. Well, sisters were coming to us and asking, do you know what happened? And we obviously did not know. You know, I had spent 40 years in the East. I didn't know where I was. And so we went to an LCWR meeting, a Leadership Conference of Women Religious, and the team from the SSJ-TOSFs were there. Jane Bloblil, Linda Sochek, Michelle Ronkowski, and Judy Davies. And so I sat down with them, Deb and Marilyn and I did, and asked, what happened? And they began to give us a brief summary of why the sisters left and how hard that is in their hearts. So we came back, and in great fear and trepidation, we went to the president, Kathleen Cluthy, and said, we would like to begin to look into this. And we would like to ask Sister Barbaralie to meet with the archivist at their place in Stevens Point. And Kathleen was so incredibly supportive, I cannot begin to tell you. It really all happened. Do you want water?
No.
It really all happened because of Kathleen's yes. So we invited the SSJ-TOSFs to come to Milwaukee to meet with Barbaralie and to meet with us and to meet with Sister Kathleen. And they went into the chapel and they all came out crying because this was where the roots of their community began. After a long period of time and lots of conversations and writing and archive to archive, we went up to Stevens Point in a snowstorm. And on their wall of their foundresses, who was there? Alexia and Alphonse, and their women foundresses. If you want to talk about, and we had a lot of high points in our provincial leadership, this was a very poignant one. To bring back together two religious communities that separated because of bigotry. And we fight against that all the time. So it was an enormous blessing for them and for us. Did I say enough, boss? You're on.
So, I'll turn this off, and Barbaralie's gonna say something. Go ahead, Barbaralie.
Kathleen is going to give the joint statement that their head of their order, Sister Jane, and Kathleen, who was our international president, a joint statement that they signed together. So I want her to read that. Thank you,
Okay,
Kathleen.
turn yourself
And
off. There you go, honey.
I can turn
Go
this
back and
off.
engage.
Probably many of you were at that spirituality conference, right? When this happened.
Yeah.
So hopefully, just in reading this again, I said to Carol, don't cry. I mean, it's still very close. It's still very close to my heart.
Yes.
And such a miracle, such a blessing. I don't think there was probably a dry eye in the conference room, right, at that spirituality conference. So this is a statement. The call to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, Francis, and Claire has brought us the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Third Order of St. Francis and the School Sisters of St. Francis. I think I need to sit down.
Move up. You wanna sit?
Let me just sit here, then I can hold the paper. Then I can hold the paper and the microphone.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Good.
Are you okay, Rosario?
Yeah.
I'll start again.
Okay.
The call to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, Francis, and Claire has brought us the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Third Order of St. Francis and the School Sisters of St. Francis to this moment in our shared histories. Responding to the signs of the times as the will of God, we are called to constant personal and communal conversion, emphasizing reconciliation and our prophetic charism as Franciscans. It has been a long journey filled with wonder and deep belief that the Spirit of God works in mysterious, albeit at times painful ways. What we have longed for in our hearts is that the truth be known, the divisions breached, and the family relationship deepened. As Franciscans, we trust in the ongoing conversion of our hearts and sing with gratitude for these steps toward a deeper relationship. Sister reaching out to sister is a beautiful sign that we are indeed closely related in our roots and in our desires to bring fuller life to a world much in need of reconciliation. We believe that this search for a new relationship is in response to the question that is being asked around the world today. What is the new that is emerging in religious life, in the church, and in the world at this time. May this sharing of our common history bring understanding, truth, and reconciliation to all of our hearts. We do not know the end result of this journey, but we do know that the blessings are within every step of this spiritual journey together. And then I signed it, and Sister Jane, the president of the Sisters of St. Joseph.
Can I just say one more sentence?
Sure. You could say two things.
Thank you, Sister.
When we went up to Stevens Point after the spirituality conference to express to the members in that house that we came in reconciliation. And I don't know who the sister was. I think she was the young sister of one of the sisters who was part of the division, or her aunt or somebody, a very close person to the division. I bent down and she was in a wheelchair, and so I got down and I said to her, we would like to express our deepest apology for any hurt that we caused. And she turned to me and she said, we were no angels either.
I don't know who gets this microphone, but leave it.
Thank
turned
you,
it-
Barbaralie, for doing this.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Sorry.
Thank you for inviting me for another session, because I think this is still a very important part of our history that needs to be discussed again and understood in its context. So I'm going to begin talking about the immigrants of the 1800s so we can put this in context. Who were they and why did they come to our shores? The first immigrants were the Irish. They came here in 1845 because of the potato famine in Ireland. Now the Irish had one great advantage. They spoke English. So they were accustomed to English ways, English, British democracy, British parliamentary politics. So they didn't feel as foreign in a foreign country as did other immigrants. The most liberal bishops, believe it or not, came from Ireland at that time. Yes, not the monks. They're the ones that mess things up, but the Irish bishops. Is it?
The chain is like making the sound.
Oh, is it? You know what, take this off. You all know I'm a school sister. Just unleash it, put it down. I was going to look like a school sister tonight, but it's conflicting. Thank you, Rosario. So where did the Irish settle? They were attracted to the, am I talking wrong or what?
No, it's okay.
It's fine.
Or is it okay?
Yeah.
They went to the large cities out east, like Boston, New York City, okay? Leave that. Now, the next immigrants were the Germans. And of course, we all know that history. They came here in the mid-19th century. And that's because Bismarck wanted to nationalize Germany. And he felt that the Pope and the Catholics were a deterrent to nationalizing the country. So what did he do? He shipped out all the religious men and women in the country, except those who were in health care. And who came to our shores but Mother Alexia and Alphonse and Sister Clara. And that's how our community began. Now, and you know that story, so I'm not gonna duplicate that. I got too much other stuff to cover. Where did the Germans settle? Mostly in the midsection of the country. They went to the small towns and to rural areas. In fact, my ancestors came from the Rhineland, and so they went to mid-Missouri, and of course then now we have Frankenstein, and all the towns around are of German origin. In fact, my mother was the only one in the early days that spoke English because she was part Irish. Alright, so that's the Germans. Next came the Polish people. They kind of dribbled in the 1850s, but then more came in the 1870s, and a big influx of Polish people came in the 1880s. Now the Polish people came here because of economic crisis and population explosion in their country. They could not acquire land, and if they even owned land, to maintain it. And so they looked to America for free land and cheap land. And so that's what brought the Polish people here. Now let's talk a little bit about what did the German culture bring with them. There were highly trained laborers, artisans, craftsmen, business people, educated people. They brought in their music, their drama, their art. And is it any wonder that the Germans considered themselves a superior race or nationality? And that didn't happen just here. That was already in existence in Germany. So you can see right there where we're going to have some conflicts. The Polish people came here totally uneducated, but they had a tremendous work ethic, persistence, and very nationalistic. All you have to do is listen to Chopin's Polonaise and realize how nationalistic Poland was. And their language meant a lot to them. And so the Polish people, many of them went to this free land. Well, first of all, they settled in Chicago, Detroit, and Milwaukee. But then the people in the later 80s settled in the northern part of Wisconsin, which would be the whole Green Bay Diocese, that was inundated with Polish people. So you have these Polish people, and if you want to know the testimony of their faith and their work ethic, all you have to do is go to St. Josephat Basilica here in the city. When the old post office in Chicago was torn down, they brought that post office bit by bit up and built this wonderful edifice of St. Josephat. If you have an appreciation for all the parks in this city, beautiful parks, that's attributed to the Germans, who valued relaxation and beauty. So thank the Germans for the beautiful trees now in those parks that many of us go to see. So I've said enough to give you a background about that. Now, what was the status of the School Sisters of St. Francis at this time? I'm talking 1900. We had 700 sisters. Now, you know, our records weren't the best at that time. Of that 700, 80 plus sisters were of Polish descent. And we operated 10 Polish schools at that time. Yeah, it's amazing. In Chicago, here, and in Detroit. And then, of course, little places in Wisconsin. So that is rather surprising.
Yeah.
Now, when those Polish sisters entered our order, they entered with the idea they were going to be teachers. Well, a little later on, and thank God there were enough teachers to fill these schools, but that's not going to be our story as we continue on. I want you to put this information to the side, and I'm going to switch gears. One of the most, I think, had the greatest impact on the Polish separation of our sisters was the Third Plenary Council of Baltimore. And let me explain. Every priest had to build a school near his parish if they didn't already have one. If the pastor did not cooperate with that, he would be removed from the parish. The parishioners had to cooperate with the pastor in the brick, mortar, and stone and the finances to put up these schools. If they did not cooperate, they were reprimanded by the bishop and given spiritual punishment, whatever that is. I'm taking this from the plenary council. I don't know what spiritual punishment is, but anyway. And then every Catholic parent had to send their children to this parochial school, with grave exception. If they could not possibly do it for whatever reasons, that had to go through the bishop. The bishops were told that all the schools in their diocese had to be a cut above the public schools. The priests were told every week, and maybe this happened in my childhood, every week the priests had to teach Baltimore Catechism and Bible history. In the seminaries, and once a week they had to go, okay? The seminaries were told when any young man comes aspiring to be a priest, he must be informed before he's ordained that his real responsibility as a priest is the Catholic education of youth. Now, can you imagine immigrants here and the pressure put on these priests? You will see how this continues to work out. I put that information aside. I'm going to shift gears again. I want to talk about our sanitarium that was built in 1893. And we have to hand it to Mother Alexia. She was a shrewd businesswoman and built that sanitarium for whatever spiritual reasons we would think was built for financial reasons. She knew that that sanitarium would generate more money than, than the rural schools especially, and the country schools. And we know from our past that in many of those schools, the sisters taught for nothing. So she learned well when she went over to Europe to be healed after the fire and all. She learned, she saw the clientele there. She mingled with them, and she saw, good idea, come to America. At the same time, she wanted a foothold yet in Germany. She wanted to establish a European province. So what did she do? She bought the Knipe Sanitarium in Erlenbad, and that gave her a footing back in Germany because it's health care, right? Well, when girls wanted to enter a community from Germany, they could not go through Germany to Erlenbad. So what did she do? 1890, just think of this, 1893 sanitarium in America, 1895 sanitarium in Erlenbad, 1898 she bought San Remo on the Italian Riviera. And that's where Stanislaus was sent. You all heard that last section. And why did she want that piece of land there? Because now the girls coming from Germany could be received at San Remo. And many of them were, or else they had to come to America. Remember, Stanislaus only had 8 people in her reception class. Only 2 of those were from America. The rest came from Germany. So, do you see how she just maneuvered this whole thing? Now, if you were a Polish priest and you were privy of this information, sanitariums, okay? To them, it appeared that we were changing our apostolate from education to health care. And this, they're gonna play that trump card all the way to the end till it goes to Rome. And they had really a valid point in thinking this. So, okay, how did we treat our sisters at the sanitarium? I'm going to read Sister Josephine Pepslinski's report. I want you to hear it from them, not from us. This is the objective view of how those sisters were treated. She was the historian at that time in their community. So let me read some of this. They were forbidden under obedience to use their mother tongue in the mother house, in the sanitarium, and at some mission homes under a German superior. Probably the German superior wanted to know what they're talking about. Some sisters were told by sister directors and the chaplain that speaking Polish constituted matter for self-accusation and confession. Can you imagine? Yet German, also a foreign language, which many did not understand, because they're American girls, they didn't understand it either, was commonly spoken. On occasion, necessary Polish books, even their own prayer books, were denied the sisters. The token Polish grammar and literature course that had been taught by Professor John Cook from Pio Nono College since 1893 was discontinued as unnecessary in 1899. And all this uprise with the Polish sisters began in 1900. So this is part of it. Those in charge of the young sisters admonished them that if they wished to speak Polish, they should have entered a Polish convent. They were of no advantage to the German congregation. They had come without a dowry, and they were bringing only disgrace. What will our patients say if they find out that we have Polish sisters? The Polish sisters began to feel like despised children in the convent they had chosen because of the commitment to Polish parish schools, which was a real needs of the time that we have as our charism. And it's too bad it didn't work, because you're gonna see this was an unbelievable needs of the time. So what really sparked the separation? All right, in St. Peter's in Stevens Point, there were 5 of our Polish sisters teaching, and Sister Sigfrida was the principal and superior. And of course, the young people in that parish were young women, very attracted to these young sisters. One of them was 18, 2 of them were 20, one 21. Sister Sigfrida was 28 years old and just ready to take perpetual vows. So it's a young crew of sisters. Obviously didn't go through a canonical novitiate, but anyway, so these 6 girls went to Sister Sigfrida and said, we'd like to join your order. And so Sigfrida prepared them. They came to our mother house. And I'm gonna call her Sister Alphonse. She was not our superior general yet. And all through their writings, they referred to her as sister. I don't think the word assistant was really used at that time. I didn't see it in our literature. So if I slip and say Mother Alphonse, she's really Sister Alphonse at this point. These young women came to her. Now remember, they came with the idea they're going to be teachers, and where did she send them? To Sacred Heart Sanitarium. They did the dishes, they scrubbed the floors, they shined the doorknobs, they cleaned the windows. That was their job. Well, now these are young women who had ambition and desire to help their people. So they began to mumble and grumble about doing all this menial work at the sanitarium. Well, eventually that got to Sister Alphonse, and she brought them together and said, all 6 of you will be dismissed from the order. And that's what happened. Now, imagine 6 young women going back to their families, to the parish. Do you think they're going to keep their mouths shut? They blabbed all over to their family and friends how terrible they were treated in our community. And it got to such a crisis point that the pastor, Father Pasinski, said, I have to go to Sister Alphonse and talk to her about this matter. So when he came, he asked Sister Alphonse, why did you send these 6 girls home when you are so in need of vocations? And I want to read her answer. Send me good, intelligent Polish postulants, and we shall gladly accept them. Tell your superior, Sister Siegfried, that when sending girls to us, she should not impress upon them that they would definitely be school teachers or sisters. For when they enter our convent, they ought to show themselves ready to do whatever will be assigned them. Really? Apparently, Sister Alphonse thought that not even one out of these 6 girls was intelligent enough to be a teacher, and to send them all home. All right? These are the 3 letters that follow. Sister Alphonse later, well, first of all, Siegfrieda was just devastated and depressed to hear no more candidates, and you can imagine how she felt at this. So, this is what Sister Alphonse wrote to Father Pasinski. Although it grieves me, I am compelled to inform you that on account of a lack of Polish sisters, we are unable to staff your school next year. In writing this letter, we do not wish to frustrate your expectation, since we think it will not be difficult for you at this time of the year to procure sisters from another community. Yours in Christ, Sister Alphonse. So what was the problem here? There was no other source. There was no community of Polish nuns. In fact, Bishop Mesmer of the Green Bay Diocese had written to Cardinal Martinelli, who was our apostolic delegate, and told him, I have so many Polish parishes in my diocese, and I have no Polish sisters to teach, except these couple of missions that we had. And he said, this already planted the seed. We need to have an order of Polish sisters. Already the seed was planted then. All right, so how do you think Father Pasinski responded to this letter? Let me tell you. Your letter written on February 20, Alphonse never dated her letters. I don't understand that. Maybe she had reason, I don't know. But it always came back because Pasinski would put it in context. Encouraged, occasioned a great deal of astonishment, for it was just as though a thunderbolt had suddenly struck from a serene sky. In fact, the affairs of my parish were going on so tranquilly and peacefully as never before. Your sisters here and everywhere are received with pleasure and even honored by all. And as far as I know, they are not experiencing any problems or difficulties, except perhaps from those 6 postulants who entered your congregation last July, 1900, and who all recently returned. I have just received a letter from our superior, Sister M. Siegfrieda, from which it is clear that a certain Peter Sikowski had sent you a disrespectful and insolent letter in which he demands the money he had given to his daughter, which was $25, upon entering the convent. But it would hardly be fair that on account of one man or a few postulants, the entire parish should be roused to anger. If, however, other reasons exist on account of which you have been prompted to recall the sisters from our parish, I would be very grateful if the reasons would be explained to me. Perhaps everything could be peacefully settled to the satisfaction of both parties. L.J. Pasinski. All right, Mother Alphonse answers him. I received your letter of March 1st. I was certainly very pleased to hear that our sisters are rendering satisfactory service in every way. Nevertheless, I wish that you procure sisters from a different source, since our sisters hardly suffice for taking care of our schools. The incident letter which I received regarding those postulants who have left our congregation were in truth partly the cause why the sisters would be recalled at the beginning of vacation. If, however, it will be entirely impossible to make a contract with another community for the following year, I shall certainly send you sisters again. Most respectfully, yours, Sister M. Alphonse. Now, it's evident from this communication that Sister Alphonse had the intention of terminating those sisters. And what did she mean when she said, for taking care of our schools? That's the German schools. And the German pastors did not have a problem, because all these sisters that came here from Germany settled in America, many of them in Wisconsin area and Milwaukee, and they were all teachers and taught in the German schools. So they didn't have the problems that the Polish priest had. And then when she mentions again about getting from another source, it is impossible. There are no Polish congregations. And we were the few congregations that took in Polish sisters. Okay? So now, if you were Father Pasinski, how would you react to all of this? When these priests are desperate and they are concerned about their children. And so, Father Pasinski was having a 40 hours devotion. And that's a long past thing, but I think, if I recall, as a child, at 40 hours devotion, the priest would invite the priest and the neighborhood, at least that happened here, they would have dinner together and meet together, and then were there either for the opening or the closing, I don't know which. So that's what Pasinski planned. 40 hours devotion. I'm inviting all the priests in this area. And what did the priests come up with? They're now going to start taking action, because they see the handwriting on the wall. They would put this whole, they called it a project, under the patronage of St. Joseph. Well, isn't that nice? And that the sisters at St. Peter's would be the nucleus to start a new order. So that's Pasinski's sisters. And also, they agreed as a group of priests that a representative from the Franciscan friary that was in that diocese, that 2 of their Franciscan priests, 2 of the diocesan priests, and 2 of the sisters would go now, because you have to go to the bishop with this. They're a diocesan, in a diocesan community if they're going to start one. So they went to Bishop Messmer. Now you have to know, Bishop Messmer was Swiss German and a canon lawyer and a scripture scholar, a very educated man. So when Messmer had this meeting, he was certainly in favor, because he was in the same boat as all these priests. and these priests are in his diocese. So he certainly affirmed them in what they were doing. And Pasinski then had to tell his sisters at the mission, this is what we have planned. You're going to be the nucleus of this. So those sisters started figuring out, well, who's going to be the leader of this? So Sister Sigfrida bowed out big time. They wanted her to do it, and she said, absolutely not, after what she experienced. And Sister Ephraim, who was the superior at Pulaski, at Assumption Church, she was all gung-ho for starting a new community, but she did not want to be the leader. So, who did Pasinski? He called his friend at Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Chicago. And that was a big parish. They had 15 Polish sisters there. And so he said, surely you must have one of your sisters that's going to be a leader. And he said, yes, the principal of this school, Sister Cleta. So she was now, and she agreed to be with this. So Pasinski informed all these sisters, and of course they had a network that passed to the sisters in Detroit and Milwaukee and everywhere else where they were. And then Messmer wrote a huge long letter, because now he has to consult with Archbishop Kanzer of Milwaukee, because our order is in Milwaukee. And so he writes this long letter, and I won't burden you with that, but I want to highlight a couple things from that letter which affected the outcome of this whole thing. Messmer cited two American situations. One of them, the Sisters of Charity in Emmitsburg out east, and the late Franciscans here in our own city. Both of those orders must have in midstream changed their apostolate. And the sisters that entered with wanting to do such and such, well, that didn't happen if they changed their mission. It would be like us going from education to healthcare. And so, in both these cases, it went to the apostolic ecclesiastical hierarchy in our country, because they were not affiliated with Rome, and in both cases it was decided that each order had to start a new congregation. So, yeah, and so Messmer was very smart in presenting that to Father Archbishop Kanzer. In addition to that, he couched this in justice. He felt that there was no injustice to our order for what, if these Polish nuns would lead, because we didn't honor the just wishes of these sisters to be educators, and certainly of these postulates who came in. So this was another thing that he looked at, and he looked at the bigger picture, which was what we did to the dignity and respect of these sisters. So that's a big portion of what he covered in his lengthy letter. So now Kanzer gets this letter, looks at it, and says, If you had started this a year ago, I could help you. But the school sisters at St. Francis have submitted their new constitution to Rome. And he said, if it's not already approved, it will be approved shortly. And he said, my hands are tied. I can't do a thing about this letter that Messmer wrote. So now Kaiser decides, well, I guess I better go and talk to Sister Alphonse. So he goes to Alphonse. And who was present with Alphonse was Father Anton Michaels. And I want to read you what Anton Michaels said. Since we had not the slightest idea that the Polish sisters planned anything like this, you can easily imagine the astonishment with which we became aware of the contents of the letter. In my opinion, the whole plan was invented by Reverend Pisicki, the Reverend Father Franciscans, and the other Polish priests, and the sisters were won over by persuasion. The whole affair a conspiracy. We have the right and duty to protest against such behavior and hereby do it with the present petition for a just investigation of the matter. In other words, we're going to Rome because our Constitution was approved in 1900 and now we're talking 1901. And so it's now, and you know how long it takes for Rome to act. Well, and in this writing of, or what the statement that Anton Michaels made, it insinuates that those Polish sisters, couldn't think on their own. Well, the truth of the matter is, they didn't. They lacked formal education and they lacked power to act in both civic and ecclesial societies. They needed knowledge to interpret, this comes from Josephine Pepslinksy, their situation in order to make a decision. And remember when I talked about characteristic of the Polish, they looked to their priests for leadership. Here's a prime example. They were not educated, looking for their priests. And in particular, Father Kaczynski's initiating, informing, organizing, and building role was indispensable to the project. So, Kaczynski was an incredible priest to these. Well, Sister Alphonse looks at all of this thing now and says, I'm calling in all the Polish superiors. I want to have a meeting with them. But before she has that meeting, dear little Sister Ephraim, who's in Pulaski, Wisconsin, writes a letter to her dear friend Vasilia in Detroit, Michigan. And she's at St. Francis of Assisi Parish. So she writes this long letter, all ecstatic about their meeting with Bishop Messmer and about starting a new congregation and spread the word. It's just great and wonderful. But at the bottom she said, when you're finished reading this, burn this letter. Don't let any German sister see this letter. Well, Basilia didn't burn the letter. So she translated, because it was written in Polish, she translated the thing in English so Sister Alphonse could read it and make sense of it. And in addition to that, she sent her own letter and sent this to Alphonse. And I want to read just a few sentences of what she said in her own letter. Will I depart from the community which took so much pain and motherly care for my welfare? I would sooner expect death than such a rebellious letter. I told my sisters that I would rather see them all dead this very minute than to find them ungrateful to the community to which they owe a deep debt of gratitude, which they never can hope to cancel. And then she goes on, and at the end she says, what pride won't do? Sister Ephraim, I often told her that she would fall someday very low, but she would not listen to me. Poor proud beings longing and seeking for superiority. So what does this show on the part of Basilia? The theology of that day. God is a punishing God, that death rather than loss of a vocation, and certainly a wrong idea of what humility is. So, okay, now, Anton Michaels takes this letter, makes a copy of it, and he sends it to Mesmer. Now, these superiors are going to meet with Mother Alphonse, and Ephraim is a superior. So when she came to the mother house, Alphonse asked her, have you written any letters to any sisters lately? And she says, oh yes. So she named 2 sisters. And Mother Alphonse looked at her and said, and not to Sister Basilia, well, Ephraim probably melted in her shoes. Then she knew that her friend had betrayed her. And now, Sister Alphonse was very persuasive when these superiors came in, that even Ephraim said she would remain with the maternal community and not break away. We all know how Alphonse respected the priest, right? She even paid money to seminarians to their seminary training to achieve priesthood. This is what she said about the Polish priest. Do not believe the Polish priest, for they will not help you, but leave you altogether to your own misfortune and allow you to disperse into the world. So here we are, a real difference between the Polish priest and German priest and others. Another part of Alphonse reflecting the superiority of the German people. And it's just ingrained in them. Now, the interesting thing is, and I don't understand why Alphonse did this, shortly after this meeting with the superiors, a Father Cook from Hull, Wisconsin, came to visit her, and Hull is very near St. Peter's and all those parishes. He begged her for nuns, and she promised him 3 nuns. Oh my God, there was a newspaper circulating in all those towns around there, and that was published in that newspaper called Rolnik. The people at St. Peter's were livid. They were angry. Here they're being threatened to have sisters taken away, and she's giving nuns to Hull, to Cape St. Casimir Parish. Woo. So once more, poor Father Pasinski, he went to Mother Alphonse again and had a meeting. This is what I don't understand, because I was told that everything was so secret when I was a postulant, and that the priest in the middle of the night yanked these nuns and all of this crazy stuff. When the priests were so above board. I mean, couldn't you see the handwriting on the wall here? Pasinski goes back to Alphonse and he begs her, look, either start a Polish province or let's start a new community. Mother Alphonse could not understand the word separation. She could not envision sisters breaking away from our community. And she just finally said, well, give us 2 or 3 years and Mother Alexia and I will form a province. Time is passing. The Baltimore Plenary Council is hanging over these priests' head. They can't wait 3 years. I don't know, maybe they didn't read, what happened in the plenary council. I have no idea. I'm sure Stanislaus did. So then what did Pasinski do? He went home very discouraged, but he was celebrating the 25th anniversary of the parish. Now realize he had to do all the work himself. He put together a book, he did all the writing, the editing. He had 323 confirmants that were going to be confirmed on that celebration. That already says something about Polish population. 323, and he was responsible, okay? He had to call the photographers, line up everything, but amid all that fury, he did not lose sight of the Polish sisters having a place where they could start their own community. So, he, outside his parish grounds, there was 50 acres of land, not 50, pardon me, 30, 20 and 15, 35 acres, I'm sorry, of land that a farmer in his parish owned. So he went to this farmer amid all this craziness and negotiated with that farmer to buy that land, because he said, I have visions of a 4-story building and an academy for these sisters. And with his own money, he bought this land, $3,500 at that time. So he's looking ahead, okay? And this is what he wrote to Mother Alphonse after he did this. Sister Alphonse, we have decided that all is now prepared for establishing the new congregation of the school sisters on July 1st of the current year. He gave a date, and yet this whole thing is still rumbling in Rome. It would be absolutely impossible to wait 2 or 3 years until your community would have judged it opportune to establish a Polish province. Do not cause any difficulty or trouble to our sisters remaining here, and we on our part shall proceed tranquilly, not causing your community any trouble. Our objective is certainly good, for we wish to provide for the smaller and poorer rural missions, procuring sisters for them, because up to this time, other religious communities have neglected to do so. Earnestly desiring for you and your community the blessing of God, I remain your most respectful L.J. Pasinski. Okay? Well, so what happened after this letter went to Sister Alphonse? Well, Mother Alexia came from Europe. And a one-liner, she writes this to Pasinski. Reverend Father, under holy obedience, I order all our sisters residing in your school to return home immediately. Yours in Christ, Mother M. Alexia, Superior General. Well, guess what? Sister Sigfrida is the only one who took the train. The other 4 young sisters refused to go. So that already had to tell Mother Alexia, is it worth fighting for at this point? Because the troops are unhappy. And Alexia didn't contact Sister Ephraim because she had already told Alphonse that she would remain in the maternal community. Well, when she heard that all this was taking place, she hopped a train and went to Stevens Point and put her name on that formal list that was to Kuczynski was gonna send to Rome. So each one of those sisters that were now contemplating had to sign a formal statement, and that had to be, a bit of a chore. So this is interesting. Mesmer, on July 1st, 1901, he brings all these Polish sisters together, and he says to them, they weren't all there, but a good representative from Chicago and these little parishes, they all came to St. Peter's. You will be known now as the Sisters of St. Joseph. And Sister Cleta said to him, we will follow the Franciscan rule, and the only change we're going to make is that of the cord that we wore, the cincture. We had 5 knots to represent the 5 wounds of Christ. They're going to change and make it to 7 in honor of the 7 sorrows and joys of Saint Joseph. And so this is, don't ask me what those are, I haven't figured them out. Anyway, I thought that's interesting, and that he really jumped the gun. So, this is interesting. So now, this whole thing is still in Rome. I'm getting to the end, so stay away. Okay, the climactic action that brought the congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph into existence on July 1st, 1901 was problematic. The sisters were aware, at least vaguely, that higher ecclesial authority would demand accountability for what had been done. Reverend A. Michaels had written to Bishop Mesmer that the School Sisters of St. Francis would continue to protest the ways and means of founding the new congregation until an impartial investigation was made. Shortly after July 1st, both parties had to have recourse to Cardinal Martinelli, our apostolic delegate in D.C. In neither case did the sisters speak for themselves on the hierarchical levels of the church. In other words, we weren't capable of handling what needed to be said and so on, even though we thought we had all the smarts and only the Polish sisters were the dumb ones. Now we also had to seek higher levels of guidance here. In neither case did the sisters speak for themselves, okay. They did not belong to the privileged class of the institution with knowledge and skills for interpreting detailed laws in unprecedented circumstances. Bishop Mesmer and the Polish priests made appeals on behalf of the new congregation, while Reverend A. Michaels presented the cause of the School Sisters of St. Francis. All right, once this went to Martinelli, he writes back, and this is to both parties, if this be the case, I would call your attention to the fact that such approval takes the community under the direct jurisdiction of the Holy See, and diocesan authority cannot interfere in its internal affairs. Consequently, no diocesan authority could, in such case, release sisters belonging to that community from their vows of obedience to its superior and permit them to join another community or found a new one. That's pretty strong language, isn't it? So where do you think this put those poor Polish sisters kind of in limbo? I mean, here you have Mesmer bullying, and now they get this. Well, Kaczynski, an unbelievable, very smart man, he writes a letter to the, and he wrote it all in Latin, a long letter to Rome, to Cardinal Ladowski in Rome. And he writes all the stuff. At the end of this long letter, he writes conclusions. And there he's giving the testimonies of sisters of how we treated them. But there's one, and we know all of that because what's her name told us. But there's one thing I want to bring to your attention. This was in his letter to Rome. Hence it must be concluded that this community has changed its primary objectives. Indeed, they deleted the name school from their official title. So their present mode of acting shows clearly that the care of the sanitarium has placed their primary objective, probably because the sanitarium brings in more money than the schools do. Moreover, to conduct only a special vocation, but also special and thorough training. A sister who learned to care for the sick is not able to be a competent teacher. And I thought, where on God's earth did Kaczynski get this? So I went, I searched, I thought, all the research I've done, I've never seen school omitted from our title. Well, guess what? In this book, I published the magnificent piece of marketing for our sanitarium. And all the the pictures, it shows a palatial place, beautiful write-up. It's, you know, I'm not gonna go through all of that. But on the first page, he's talking, whoever wrote this, and they're talking about St. Mary's Hill, the psychiatric hospital. Both institutions are under the supervision of the Sisters of St. Francis, right there. And I thought, Kaczynski is too smart not to have some evidence that we omitted that from our title. And right there it is, in this publication, because it probably was a real ploy to sell our sanitarium, I mean, the services that we offered. And it looked as if we are educators, how can we, be so proficient in healthcare? So to make a long story short, thank you for your patience. I'm going to now just briefly say that this congregation actually was growing while all of this was happening. I mean, girls were lining up to enter this community. The needs of the time. So it became so important to these priests, and seeing the growth of the community, that Kaczynski called all the priests together, even from Chicago and that. And this is what they decided, that as soon as that statement would come from Rome, the declaration, Kaczynski would transfer that property to these sisters. The deed would go to them and they would own it. And then, this was an interesting resolution. And it was unanimously passed by all these priests, that in the event Rome decides that the Polish sisters should return to the convent in Milwaukee or form a province, they should be advised to request permission from proper authority to be dispensed from their vows, remove their habits, and then form a new congregation with the permission of their respective bishops. Kind of smart, wasn't it? A smart way of going at it. Well, guess what? April 9th, 1902, Bishop Mesmer broke ground. And that very day, Martinelli came with the declaration saying, here it is, you can start a new community. He was already laying the cornerstone and breaking ground. This guy was something else. And so thereafter, you know, they had to go through the same formalities that we do. But these are important things, I think, and I'll do this fast, that the sisters, and this was in this document, okay, that's coming from Rome now. The sisters at present living outside the mother community are now released from the vow of obedience owed the superior of the Mother Institute, and that the obligation of this vow is transferred to the Mother Superior, whom the Most Reverend Ordinary of Green Bay for this first time alone will have chosen. So those sisters that were in that initial group and that signed, they didn't have to go through any formalities with vows or anything, renewal. They just walked right in and were sisters of St. Joseph. That if among the now separated sisters there be any who have not yet completed their full canonical novitiate, they complete the same in a place which the aforesaid Ordinary of Green Bay shall designate. And that's one of the conclusions that Krasinski wrote in his thing, that we didn't follow canonical orders of that 1 year novitiate. I mean, that one gal was sent out at 18 years old, okay? Now, this is interesting, that the above privilege be made available only to those sisters who have already separated themselves from the mother community, and that should there be any others from any other religious institute who should desire to join this congregation, they may not appeal to this decree as giving them permission to do so, but must in each individual case have recourse to their own ordinary or to the Holy See, depending on whether their institute is of diocesan right or approved by the Holy See. For the rest of those sisters, they had to go through a process. And so that was made very clear. And so now, every year on July 1st, the sisters celebrate their Foundress Day, just as we do April 28th. And their cornerstone and all of that. And that was in 1901 that Krasinski did that. And well, in Mesmer. And April 9th, 1902 is when they got the apostolic approval of, I mean, not apostolic, they got it from Rome. Because we are an international order, and we have to go through Rome with all of that. So the sisters have been a very successful order. They really grew in leaps and bounds and were able to teach their Polish immigrants, and to get all of this done within that 2-year period was a miracle, really. But I always say that those priests really gave those nuns a voice. And it's just too bad. I feel bad. When I read all of this and Mother Alphonse and the letters that those poor nuns wrote, I actually had tears. I cried, because I love Mother Alphonse. And I hope you still have great esteem for her, because she did a lot for our community. That chapel is a living memorial of Sister Alphonse. It may be a pain right now to figure out what we're gonna do with it at this point. But it's tremendous work of art, and it's typifies who she really is. So, and as I said, she was part of the German culture, and it really comes through strong, in how she dealt with this. It would be very interesting today, well, even in our time, remember when Sister Columkill started a new order? You know, and I don't know all the history to that. It didn't go, it went for a while, but you know, she didn't have the numbers in that. So we've had a breakaway there. And I think of how we would have handled this today in such a different way. Well, probably it wouldn't have been even a problem today, because we would have looked upon this as a needs of the time and tried to make it work. I mean, it was a gold mine for us if we could have made it work. And that's one thing I have to tell you, Archbishop Kotzer did not approve of Mother Alexia building that sanitarium. And you know how Mother Alexia is very persistent, consistent, and pushed it, and he finally gave in to her. But he was not in favor of, and then in the end, you know, Mesper said there was no injustice to our order. Well, to Kotzer, he put it all in financial terms. You know, that those sisters came in without dowries, and then if we're gonna lose these 10 schools, that's a financial drain on us. He put everything in finances, and, you know, rightfully so, but Messmer painted the bigger picture of the indignity to these people, to these Polish sisters. And so anyway, I'm sure you don't have any questions at this hour of the night. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. I hope you are more informed now of,
Oh my dear. The book that Barbaralie wrote is titled Obedient to God, because their vow of obedience was taken away, and they proceeded anyway. So Deb named it Obedient to God.
yeah, thank you.
And that book, is it that book that's sold on Amazon that you can buy
I
on
didn't see,
Amazon?
no, this is not sold. In fact, Carol, you sent this copy to all the missions, did you not?
Oh, yeah.
I thought so, yeah. And so this book is not on Amazon. I didn't see this, but Corona and,
Sister
Stanislaus.
Barbaralie has several books on Amazon, and she hadn't checked it, and so she did the other. She said, they have 5 stars, some of them.
yeah, 5 out of the 6 are 5-star books.
Well, that's because you're a 5-star person,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, show the interest of the people who bought them. And they long lost my address, because I've been in so I never got royalties on this. At least the publicity is out there. Yes.
Associate Relationship is so proud to have Sister Barbaralie here. And she's done one before and one tonight, and 2 more left to go. She has 2 more left to go, and when we see this type of crowd, we know that this is the right thing to do. And she's a great, great speaker, so thank you.
And thank you for all who are deeply appreciated. And now it's very dark outside.